Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Craydon. Thank you for joining me on this Tuesday morning, October the 8th. We've got some exciting things to show you this morning. To keep you up to date on what you need to know, all the news you need to know. When we come back, the latest on the impasse in the House of Commons, what it means. So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please like the station now. It's working. We're beating YouTube censorship. We beat it every day now. Thank you for watching my interview yesterday with Member of Parliament Michael Barrett. I know a lot of you have been saying, have Michael on the show. Let's talk about what's going on with the impasse, with the corruption, the Liberal government. This guy is on top of this file, and it was so nice to have him on the show. We're going to do more of this in the fall, and I promise you, I've been promising that for quite a while. We're going to have more members of Parliament on this show to talk about these issues. I spent 9 years working on the Hill. If I can't deliver some real interviews for you, then I should be doing something else. I mean, let's face it. This can't be about showing you just recycled clips that other people have done. These shows have got to be about real journalism. I think that's what I'm continuing to provide. So we had that story yesterday with Michael Cooper up on the Post Millennial. Have a look at that story. I should have probably got a screenshot of that. I didn't. Somebody's going to be mad at me. Producer will be mad at me over that. So, but what's happening in the House of Commons? Well, it was chaos yesterday, of course, in question period, because it was the anniversary of the October 7th Hamas invasion of Israel, and their emotions and tensions were high. But we'll get into one of the ironies of all this in a minute, and we'll get back to the parliamentary security has gone crazy on Parliament Hill, because I'm the only one talking about the bubble zone, for instance. Nobody else wants to acknowledge it. But there is a bubble zone now on Parliament Hill. You can't get in to so-called harass MPs, even talk to them as they come out of the building, because the security will throw you across the street. Not literally, but they'll tell you to go across the street. And I'm going to show you what one security guard said to somebody yesterday. This is courtesy of Dacey Media, my good friend Chris Dacey. He does some marvelous work, but he caught this, and I'm not going to tell you what it is until you won't believe what this parliamentary security guard told this person. So it's the bubble zone, plus it's up to the individual security guard's discretion as to how extensive that bubble zone could be and who it applies to. So let's get into the meat of the discussion today, and I think we'll start with Pierre Poilievre mocking Karina Gould, the Liberal Party House leader. Well, no, she's the government House leader. But let's face it, she is so neck deep in partisanship. She's really incapable of being a good House leader. This is the same woman. I'll say it again because it's unbelievable. She was the same woman, had her photograph proudly taken with Jaroslav Hunka, the former member of the Waffen-SS, the former Nazi, who proudly came to the House of Commons to receive, 2 or 3 standing ovations from everybody in the House of Commons, including a chief of defense staff who really should have known better that we weren't fighting the Russians in the Second World War. The Germans were. And Germany's allies, including Ukrainians who joined the Waffen-SS, they were fighting the Russians. Canada wasn't fighting the Russians, but that's how stupid the Liberal Party upper echelon is. But Karina Gould, she was just fine with this, had her picture taken proudly with Jaroslav Hunka. And here she is now. This is so funny. She's saying, okay, there's an impasse in the House of Commons. We're supposed to talk about Liberal corruption, but that's a violation of your charter rights. It's incredible. By the way, are you seeing anything in the mainstream media about what's actually going on in the House of Commons right now? No. It's like, see no evil. They will not talk about it. Now, yesterday, almost as soon as I did the interview with Michael Barrett, I see they're dealing with some routine proceedings. Now, I clarified that with the official opposition office yesterday, and nothing's changed. They're still telling Parliament the Speaker's rule is still being enforced. They are dealing with routine proceedings, and they are dealing, of course, with question period, as usual. So that hasn't changed. Don't be fooled. If you turned the question period on yesterday and you saw some debate afterwards on some committee motions and committee rulings, that is part of the procedure. So let's watch Pierre Poilievre absolutely annihilate Karina Gould here. I find this absolutely entertaining.
The NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, the crime, or the corruption. The Prime Minister has ground the work of Parliament to a halt by refusing to respect your ruling. The government must hand over evidence to the police concerning the $400 million spending scandal that saw Liberal appointees give millions of dollars to their own companies. The Auditor General says there's 186 conflicts of interest in this scandal. Will the Prime Minister end the cover-up, respect your ruling, give the police the information so that we can have accountability and get back to work?
The Honourable Leader of the House in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's demonstrably false what the Leader of the Opposition is saying, because your ruling was to send this matter to the House and Procedure Affairs Committee for more study.
His ruling was for the House to contemplate this issue. Karina Gould couldn't tell the truth to save her life. She's the most partisan member of that. Well, next to, shall we say, Mark Holland, the Minister of Euthanasia, who is probably even more partisan than she is, and incapable. And wasn't he the former Liberal House Leader as well? Interesting how they always put the most partisan MPs in charge of being House Leader.
And so, in fact, it is only the Conservatives that are now obstructing their own obstruction, because they don't want this to go to committee, because it would demonstrate that they are trying to upend charter rights and override police independence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Oh, I see. It's about charter rights. Isn't it obvious that we can't contemplate or think about Liberal corruption because that's going to violate my charter rights to do so? This is such a convoluted, insane argument. And they actually got the Attorney General, Mr. Censorship himself, Varani, up on his feet to talk about this as well. To second, to also agree with Karina Gould that this is a horrible violation of charter rights if we contemplate Liberal corruption. You got to hear the end of this.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliament can get back to work this minute if the government will just hand over the evidence to the police about this $400 million Liberal spending scandal. I found it interesting. They say everybody's going to lose their charter rights if the police get evidence into this $400 million Liberal spending scandal. Right. No, what will happen is that the Liberal nominees and appointees who engaged in 186 conflicts of interest to stuff their own pockets will be held criminally accountable, and Canadians might get their money back. Why won't they hand over the evidence, respect your ruling, so we can get back to work around here?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, what's interesting about this is that there's actually proof that the Leader of the Opposition is saying is false, because in your ruling you said this matter needs to go to the House and Procedures Affairs Committee for further study, because this is unprecedented in what the Conservatives are putting forward, because, as the RCMP mentioned, it would upend charter rights and it would blur the lines between judicial and legislative independence. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives can follow your ruling and we can all go back to work, which is what exactly the Canadians want us to do.
I think Canadians want us to examine Liberal corruption, Karina, which you don't want to examine. You have no intention of looking at this, and this is all subterfuge. All of this argument about charter rights, what, you think the RCMP needs a search warrant to look at these documents? All this is about is looking at unredacted, meaning uncensored, meaning documents that haven't got those big black marker lines through them, about the Green Slush Fund, otherwise known as Sustainable Development Canada, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, SDTV, at the SDTC. Now, That's all this is about, is getting uncensored documents relating to how the Liberals gave contracts to their friends to the RCMP. This is nothing about a search warrant. This is nothing about violating anybody's charter rights. These documents need to go to the RCMP so they can supposedly do their job of enforcing the law. They don't seem to like to do that when it involves the Prime Minister or the Liberal government. It's hands up. Hands up. In fact, they've already said they don't really want to look at the documents. But if the Conservatives can table these documents, we can get them public. And that's really what this is about. That's really what this is about. And this is where we need to go with this. Not this BS about charter rights being violated. When did this Liberal government ever care about charter rights? When it beat the heads of the Freedom Convoy protesters, when it brought down the full force of the police, 3 groups of them against the Freedom Convoy protesters, peaceful protest in Ottawa. No arms in sight, no violence at all, not a single incident. They brought down the full force of the law with the Emergencies Act, which was unconstitutional to invoke. When did they care about your charter rights when they did that? When did the Liberal government care about your charter rights when they froze the bank accounts of not just Freedom Convoy protesters, but anybody who donated to the Freedom Convoy protest? They froze their bank accounts. And you know, there are some people who still haven't got their bank account unfrozen. What about your charter rights? Hey, Karina, what about my charter rights there? What about the charter rights of those who opposed your government? You don't give a damn about their charter rights. The charter rights don't have any relevance to this government at all if it doesn't serve as a useful talking point. I can tell you what happened here. When the government shut down, they said, how are we going to make this into a manageable communications issue? And yes, Karina was sitting there, maybe Justin, if Justin had the time of day for this, because you know Justin's above politics now. Yeah, Justin hasn't got time for politics. He's just there for you. He's just there for the people. He's just doing what has to be done. He's rolling up his sleeves and he's getting the work for the Canadian people. He hasn't got time for politics. So he leaves that to his people like Karina Gould and Mark Holland, the real savage partisans in the House of Commons. They get on with it with the comms people, and they say, how are we going to get through this one? Well, let's say it's about charter rights, and let's stick to that. And let's say the Speaker didn't want us to talk about this at all in Parliament, didn't want to shut down Parliament. He wanted it to go to a committee. And let's just keep saying that over and over and over again, and maybe Canadians will start to believe it. That's always the strategy. That's the communication strategy of the Trudeau government. Keep repeating the lie. Where did we hear this one before? Oh, yeah, there was a German propaganda minister. He used to say that all the time. It seems to be the philosophy of the Liberal government as well, though. This just keep repeating the same falsehood, the same lie over and over again. Talk about this being about charter rights when you don't give a damn about anybody's charter rights except your own, and maybe it'll sink in. Now, Michael Barrett was on his feet talking about this yesterday in House of Commons, just about a couple of hours, almost an hour and a half after he finished my interview. He was up in question period talking about this.
You who ruled that this NDP Liberal government obstructed a lawful order of this House by not turning over the evidence in the $400 million corruption scandal. It has this Parliament paralyzed and unable to deal with the misery and chaos that's been created after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. And taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for the cover-up of this latest corruption scandal. So will they simply provide the evidence to the police so that this House can get back to its work of holding them accountable?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that member is again false in his statements, because what you clearly ruled was that this matter should be sent to committee for further study, because it is the first time in this Parliament's history that it is taking its extraordinary powers and abusing them in such an egregious way. The issue with which the honourable member is discussing has been dealt with by this government, but it's up to the Conservatives to stop obstructing their own obstruction so that we can all get back to the important.
That's another talking point. Conservatives are obstructing their own obstruction, whatever the hell that means. But hey, it sounds good.
Important work of governing for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Only a Liberal would get up in this place and say that the majority of members in this House who are democratically elected exercising powers that are legally bestowed upon this Parliament are somehow infringing upon this government's constitutional right to not be investigated by the RCMP for their own corruption. It's absolutely unbelievable. Over 186 conflicts of interest, $400 million lining the pockets of well-connected Liberal insiders, while Canadians are lined up at food banks in record numbers. So we want to know if this government's expecting the NDP to bail them out and stop us from holding them to account.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr.
We're not going to listen to Brian. He says the same thing. But why am I playing this again? Well, actually, I haven't played this clip before. But why am I repeating what the Conservatives are saying here about what's happening with the Green Slush Fund, with Sustainable Development Technology Canada? Why am I repeating it? Because it is gross corruption. It is sickening. It should make you run to the toilet and throw up. It's so nauseating. But Karina Gould says, we don't want to talk about this because it's a violation of your charter rights if we do that. And Mr. Speaker, didn't you say we should talk about this in committee? Oh, so this is not true. So Karina Gould should have her head examined. But of course, all she's doing is repeating the Liberal Party talking points on this ad nauseum over and over again. But we need to look at this, and we need to remember how corrupt this Trudeau government is. It is amongst the worst in the world. It's probably as corrupt as Ukraine, the Ukrainian government, which is the most corrupt in Eastern Europe. But of course, Trudeau and Ukrainian president get along famously, perhaps because they're both actors and because they both run corrupt governments. Maybe that's what their common denominator is. That would seem to me to be the case. Anyway, we're coming up to a great clip. If you're interested at all in what's happening in the United States with FEMA, this is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is also corrupt, which is also in the bag for the Democratic Party, which is also not saving lives unless it has something to do with equity. I've got a clip to show you that it's going to knock your socks off, that it's going to just absolutely blow your mind. It's incredible. But before we get here, here's the big controversy in the House yesterday with Melanie Joly looking really insulted and demanding an apology from Justin Trudeau because he said she was pandering to Hamas.
The Foreign Affairs Minister two opportunities to condemn the increasingly common and terrifying anti-Semitic chants we hear in the streets. Israel will soon be gone. There is only one solution: Intifada, revolution. Twice she refused to condemn those remarks. She continues to pander to Hamas supporters in the Liberal Party as part of her leadership campaign rather than doing her job. So I'll give her another chance. Will she publicly support Israel's right to retaliate against the tyrants of Tehran and the terrorists in Hezbollah and Hamas to protect itself? Yes or no?
Yeah. We don't do politics about.
I just want to encourage all members to ensure, consistent with rulings in the past, and I will come back to this near the end of question period, but just to caution all members to please be judicious in their words. The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, if there's a day where we don't do politics about people's lives being taken or people being killed, it's today. We are all against any form of anti-Semitism, I hope, in this House, any form of discrimination. And I really hope that my colleague in front will apologize.
Right Said exactly that. Pierre Poilievre has to apologize. For what? Stating the truth? Yeah, she's been all over the map on this issue. She will do whatever she has to. She'll say whatever she thinks she needs to say to stay elected. And she has no principles in this. She really doesn't have a standard. She has no moral standard. And here she is, just back from the Francophonie summit in Paris, where she had a great time, reportedly. She's just back from the Francophonie summit, and her sidekick, Justin Trudeau, wasn't there in the House yesterday. I guess he's still recovering from the great time he had at the Francophonie summit. And remember, Justin's not doing politics, right? This has nothing to do with politics. He's in Paris working for Canadians, doing the things that he needs to do to make the country work properly, rolling up his sleeves, as he's always saying, getting to work for Canadians. And don't ask me about politics, because I'm not here for politics, Justin says. Not at all. Now, we're going to get to some interesting stuff here in a minute. And I encourage you, please, don't miss this clip I have from FEMA, the U.S. department that is screwing up the disaster assistance in the South. Why do you think they're doing that? Why do you think they've done such a lousy, incompetent, horrible job of saving lives and delivering disaster assistance in the southern United States, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida? Why do you think they're doing such a bad job, especially in the rural parts of the state? Why is that? Maybe it's got something to do with the fact that these people don't really vote Democrat. They're staunch Republicans, and the Democrats don't really want them to get too much help. Now, you say that's a horrible thing to say, David, but wait till you listen to this clip, because just as Hurricane Helene broke, the FEMA website was exposed in terms of what they really stand for. But before we get there, all right, so you're saying Pierre Poilievre should lay off poor Melanie Joly. Poor Melanie. You know, she's such a nice woman. And she's really on the side of the right here. She's doing all she can. Well, watch what happened to these folks when they tried to get into the House of Commons yesterday. This is unbelievable footage. Once again, thank you to Chris Dacey for getting this. Unbelievable. And notice where they are, by the way.
You are not a supporter of Palestine. You are not permitted on... Yeah, that was before you admitted being against this cause over here.
You never said he was against this cause.
Yeah, you did. You said he's not a supporter of Palestine and doesn't recognize Palestine as a state.
No, I didn't say that.
But do you want to...
Holy crap! Are you hearing this? This security guard, somebody get this bozo's name, says you're not allowed past me because you're not a supporter of Palestine? I mean, regardless of where you stand on this issue, regardless of how you feel about this issue, you don't tell people they can't come in unless they support Palestine. But this bozo thinks he can say that.
Do we want to rewind the video and see?
Well, there's no audio in the actual.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Eh? But no.
Well,
So you said it.
Camera,
So you said it to me. My colleague understood.
Yeah, I said I don't
clearly.
accept Palestine as a state. That doesn't mean I'm anti-Palestinian people.
You don't recognize. And you said you don't support Palestine. Okay?
I don't recognize Palestine as a state.
You said if he took the
You told me if I were to take the shirt off, I could come in.
Well, that was before you changed your story to I don't support Palestine and I don't recognize Palestine as a state.
Look, I'm
And so,
not wearing
hold
anything
on.
that's inflammatory.
Hold on.
And I just
Hold
want to
on.
do interviews.
Hold on. Then at the end, right before I left, I said, you are not to go on this side. Right?
No,
This is a clear free speech, infringement of free speech.
Then after, no, I'm not.
Yeah, this is very tyrannical.
You can believe that if you wish.
Well, it
You want
is.
to come up on Parliament Hill? Other side.
So to be on this side, do you need to declare your support for Palestine? Is that a prerequisite to be over here?
Declare your support for Palestine.
Well, you declared that you're against it.
No, he never declared he was against. No, he didn't.
Did he?
I mean,
No, he didn't.
how are...
the shirt and the Louis Vuitton.
But you're not
Saying he doesn't recognize Palestine as a state is not declaring he's against Palestine. You guys are, this is gross miscarriage.
Are you
of
speaking for
justice.
him?
I'm speaking for myself. This is a miscarriage
Have
of
I
justice.
said that you're not allowed to? Have I said anything to you?
No, but I'm calling it as I see
right
it.
now. You are
It's an
not
infringement
permitted
of
on
free speech.
This side over here. where the pro-Palestine event is taking place.
So
Parliament Hill,
to be
they
allowed,
share your message.
right, so
You
to be
go
allowed
on the
in
other
public
side.
area, you have to show your support for Palestine.
No, you've just proven to me and said very clearly you are against Palestine.
So I'm not allowed in certain public areas if I have certain political opinions.
Right now, today, no.
Then that's a contradiction. It's a public area.
Okay, so why is this guy working on Parliament Hill? Who the hell gives him the right to tell people they can't even walk across their partition unless they support Palestine? I don't think that's a prerequisite for visiting the House of Commons, whether you support Palestine or you support Israel in this Gaza war, no matter what your feelings. That's got nothing to do with Canadian democracy. It's got nothing to do with visiting the House of Commons. And yet these security guards are not only imposing a bubble zone, they're not even allowing these people to walk across the sidewalk. Now they're saying you can't even walk across the sidewalk if you don't support Palestine. Who the hell is in control? It's another symptom of a government that has gone berserk. We don't have a real government anymore. We have a Liberal Party that's doing everything it can to stay in power, and it can't even manage parliamentary security with any sense of responsibility. Now, maybe I shouldn't have called this guy a bozo. I don't know who he is. He's a bureaucrat, not a politician. But this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable, just like a bubble zone is unacceptable. And you won't hear the mainstream media talk about this. You won't hear the mainstream media even mention the fact that there is a bubble zone on Parliament Hill right now. Now, we're going to get to one of the most shocking parts of the show today, and I want you to watch this. This is a private Zoom call with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, the ones who have botched up the disaster assistance so badly in the southeast of the United States after Hurricane Helene. And there's another coming. Hurricane Milton is on the way, so these people are going to be doing it again. But look at the fake news here from the Guardian, this left-wing rag that says FEMA chief warns dangerous Trump falsehoods hampering Helene response. What are those dangerous Trump falsehoods? Well, namely that that FEMA has given billions of dollars to illegal immigrants. That's true. FEMA admitted that. In fact, the White House press secretary, Karina Jean-Pierre, admitted that in a news conference. Yeah. And not only that, but FEMA has said its primary objective, the number one thing it's concerned about, is not saving lives, is not giving people the aid they need. It's not making sure people recover from natural disasters. It's ensuring that equity is job one. That's what FEMA is all about. They say that on their website. Their number one objective is equity, which is a bullshit word for meaning if you're not part of a special group, you get screwed. So it's all about making things right for groups that are perceived to be disadvantaged. And those groups can be whomever the good liberals like the workers at FEMA decide they are. Now listen to this. You won't believe this.
A few things in my mind thinking.
And start again.
Sparked a few things in my mind thinking about preparedness and how you said, LGBTQIA people and people who have been disadvantaged already are struggling. They already have their own things to deal with. So you add a disaster on top of that. It's just compounding on itself. And I think that is maybe the why of why we're having these discussions, is because it isn't being talked about. It isn't being socialized. We're not paying attention to this community. Thank you so much. Maggie.
Before we get to Maggie, do you believe this? LGBTQ people are not disadvantaged. They make the best salaries in the world. They're absolutely lauded by mainstream media and the entertainment industry. How are they disadvantaged? What a stupid, completely false thing to say. But these are the people, we have to look after the LGBT community first because it's about equity. And this woman coming up, Maggie, states it very well.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a couple of things that are intersecting in my mind here. One of them is the culture of emergency management as an organization, as an industry in the United States specifically, not abroad. This has, and my cat sometimes does this, she gets really loud suddenly, so you'll have to just allow for the little meowing in the background. The shift that we're seeing right now is a shift in emergency management from utilitarian principles where everything is designed for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to disaster equity. But we have to do more, right? And so this topic is intersecting, I think, with a number of other topics where we have to look at policies and understand to what extent they have disadvantaged communities that had less assets, communities that had pre-existing vulnerabilities in accessing disaster-related recovery supports.
Disaster equity. She learned a new word with intersecting. These people just want them. They make me want to throw up. I can't believe they even talk like this. So if you're not part of their perceived disadvantaged communities, which is all a crock of shit, excuse my language, because these are not disadvantaged communities. They're some of the wealthiest people in the world, at least in terms of the United States. But these are not disadvantaged. And for this woman to say that we have to focus the aid assistance in terms of how it enhances equity is insane. And these people are the ones running FEMA right now and are running disaster assistance. And they don't give a damn. If you're not part of their disadvantaged community, you ain't getting much help, brother, because you're not on our list. Now, this is shocking. I shared this with you because it's hard to believe, but that's the state of politics, not only in the United States, but in Canada. You can bet they talk the same way in Canada. We found that out the day before, a couple of days before the million-person march in Canada. We had government employees, unionized government employees, having a Zoom call about how they were going to stop the million-person march, how they were going to interfere with it, how they were going to set up counter-protests. And it had absolutely nothing to do with their field of expertise, had nothing to do with their business, had nothing to do with their jobs, because they consider equity to be job 1, 2. That's how sick our society has become. Thank you for watching today. I've gone a bit over time. Appreciate your support. Have a look at the store today. And I will be back again tomorrow. And throughout the week, we're here 7 days a week, giving you all the news you need to know so you can continue to resolve to resist. Bye for now.